Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, surely the only YouTube channel that follows up a Pagani review with a Tudor review. I'm a big fan of the Tudor Pelagos. When I first reviewed the watch at the beginning of last year, I described it as mighty. So mighty, in fact, that it made it into my top 5 list at the end of last year. Not so mighty that I didn't find 3 things to complain about though. First being the thickness. 14.3mm is just a little bit too thick for a daily, I think. 500 meters of water resistance, I admit, but who really needs 500 meters of water resistance? And then there's the dial text. 5 lines, a veritable haiku of text beneath the pinion. Again, a lot of which is unnecessary and just clutters up what otherwise would be a really clean looking dial. And my third complaint was the clasp. An engineering marvel admittedly, but this isn't junior school mathematics. You don't have to show your working. Again, I think that could have been much cleaner if they'd wanted it to be. Enter the new Pelagos FXD. It's slimmer than the old model. There's less text on the dial and it doesn't come on a bracelet, conveniently avoiding the problem of that overcomplicated clasp. Is it therefore the perfect Pelagos? Stay tuned for my thoughts. Now, I haven't just bought this, but I know a man who has. Mr. X, he is back and he is buying. His credit card is smouldering hot from all his recent watch purchases. There are a couple of other Tudors in the queue for review. Stay tuned for those. If you want a sneak preview of what he's bought and therefore what's coming up on this channel, check out his Instagram at @TheRealMrX_Sydney. I'll leave a link to it in the description of the video. But for now, let's flip the camera and have a look at this one. Alright, while I'm getting into this rather plain cardboard Tudor box, let's have a look at the Tudor website because there is some important information on this model that I think is relevant. There it is on the Tudor Australia website, the Pelagos FXD. Now that stands for fixed. This one has fixed lugs, which I think is one of the main things you have to consider if you are looking at one of these. 5,300 Aussie dollars, which is a grand cheaper than the regular model on the bracelet. I'll circle back to that price a bit later on. Now, Marine Nationale tie-in, you'd be hard pushed to know anything about that from this particular page. Complimentary strap, they give you 2 straps. I doubt it is for free. It's only when you scroll down and you click that button with Discover More that it takes you into the underwater world of the Marine Nationale, the French Navy. Now, Tudor have been making watches with and for the Marine Nationale since the 1950s. They were the official supplier throughout the 1980s. Now, technically, this one is not a dive watch. It is capable of depth, but it is not a dive watch. This is an underwater navigation tool and so has one other crucial modification from the regular Pelagos, that being a countdown bezel. Underwater navigation, teams of 2 divers with a rope between them going from point A to point B to point C to point D underwater, and they need that countdown bezel to do it. So if that's how you spend your weekends, then stop the video now. You've found your dream watch. For the rest of us, I think it's a little more complicated than that. You have to consider that bezel. You also have to consider those fixed lugs, whether that suits you, suits the way that you wear your watches. And there it is, and what a handsome looking watch the Pelagos really is. Definitely one of the best looking dive style watches that I have ever reviewed on the channel, whether you go for the blue, whether you go for the black, whether you go for this one, the standard, the ETA powered version. They are all absolutely gorgeous. I would not get tired of looking at that classic design for decades, I suspect, never mind years, months or weeks. This one has a couple of features. As discussed, it has that countdown bi-directional bezel and it has fixed lugs. One other thing you need to take into consideration is they have deleted the date. This has a no date specific MT5602 Tudor in-house movement. That cleans up the look no end, I think. In addition to the lack of that 5th line of text, they've removed the kind of rotor self-winding thing. But if you need a date for work or just because you can't remember what date it is, then yeah, perhaps you'd be better off going for the regular model. Similar set of dimensions to the regular one. They say 42mm, I measure it at 42.5 because the bezel does protrude slightly, as you can see there, meaning it's even easier to grip if you are doing some underwater navigation. Now, another crucial dimension, 12.6mm thick. It's 1.5mm thinner than the regular one. One of the complaints from people when they moved from the ETA to the Tudor in-house a couple of years ago was that it puffed up the thickness, so it's good to see them thinning it down. They achieved this by reducing the water resistance from 500 to 200. As discussed, this isn't a diver's watch as such, it's for underwater navigation. Lug to lug, because of those fixed lugs, is considerable at 52mm, 22mm lug width, and on this supplied, complimentary apparently, rubber strap, it weighs in at 93 grams, very similar weight on the other fabric and Velcro number. I'll show you it on both of the straps over the course of the video. Case finishing is absolutely gorgeous. It's titanium, it's got that kind of satin brush effect, and it is just so super sharp. Look at that chamfer running from the lug. Look at those tiny little flat edges either side of the semi-guarded crown. Look at the crown, all made of titanium, bezels made of titanium as well. It does have a stainless steel case back. I guess that's so that it doesn't fuse to that case with time, as titanium tends to do, but just beautiful, really gorgeous finishing. The glass covering the dial is flat sapphire with anti-reflective undercoating, and that is a ceramic insert on that bi-directional bezel. Let's talk about that bezel then. 120 click. Bi-directional, beautifully snicky, feels great, sounds good, and everything lines up perfectly. But because it is a countdown style, you'll be using it to time eggs or time the amount of money you've pumped into the local parking meter rather than timing dives or anything of that nature. But it does feel very, very nice indeed. One thing I noted from my last Pelagos was everything that you interact with on the watch just feels fantastic. The crown is no exception. Listen to this. Oh, did you hear that crack when the crown pops? It's not a pop, it's a crack. Similarly, when you pull it out to the time set position, there is another audible crack in there as well. All very, very nice, but then again, you would expect that because it's a Tudor and it's not exactly cheap. Now, unlike the Yema GMT Navy Graph Marine Nationale tie-in that I included in a three-way GMT Fight Club video a couple of weeks ago that wore its Marine Nationale tie-in very proudly and very prominently on the dial of the watch, the only evidence of the tie-in on this Tudor is on that stainless steel caseback. It is beautifully etched there though, I have to say, very, very nice indeed. And in the tradition of Marine Nationale tie-ins with Tudor, it says 21 being the year that this watch was designed. And yeah, how's that for a time grapher reading? Pretty much spot on. This is the second one of these movements that I've looked at now, obviously, and it's the second one that was absolutely bang on the money. 25 joule hacking and hand winding, bi-directional winding, 28,800 vibrations per hour, so it's a high beat auto, 70-hour power reserve. That was the big advantage when Tudor decided to develop their own in-house caliber. There was a question mark about the reliability of those just when they were new, but they've now been in thousands and thousands of watches since 2015, so I think we can all sleep comfortably at nights knowing that it's a cracker of a movement. So cracking movement and cracking looks then from the Pelagos. I must say, outside it does look a little paler than I've seen in some other YouTube videos. They call it navy blue, but it does have a kind of lighter tone. Studio lighting's a bit different, but this is fairly reflective of what my eyes were seeing when I shot this footage. Applied indices, classic Tudor fashion, triangle at 12, large rectangles at the 3, the 6 and 9, and smaller squares everywhere else. I reckon one way they were able to thin this one down slightly is by using a thinner chapter ring. If you notice, the chapter ring is very small and it doesn't impede into those indices. The indices were somewhat inlaid into the chapter ring. This one, I guess, is a little bit thinner. It doesn't quite have the same depth, but that is not a problem. So Tudor, the Tudor Shield and Genève printed above the pinion, and only 4 lines of text beneath it. Pelagos, chronometer, officially certified, 200 meters, 660 feet. Now, being a chronometer means it is officially certified, so I reckon there is still one line that they can remove if they so choose on future models. And the handset, what a handset. Classic Tudor snowflake. Our hand, we've got the snowflake, second hand and lovely fence post minute hand, all in white. Really, really legible against that blue dial, as you can see here. And it's a really good looking bezel insert as well here, all very nicely legible. And I think this watch is as good looking on wrist as it is on that big lump of wood outside in my garden. Now I've got a 7-inch wrist for your reference, 52 lug to lug, actually no problem at all. Now 12.6mm thick, as discussed, it is slimmer than the regular Pelagos. You do give a little bit of that back though. Because of those fixed lugs, you are obliged to use single pass style straps, so you are adding a mil or so with this rubber one. The rubber one's okay, there's a little bit of flex in here, 22 all the way along, no taper, and it does have a nice brushed titanium buckle and tang with the Tudor shield etched in there. Yeah, that is a handsome watch. Now, given that this is a Marine Nationale tie-in, you might have expected one of the two supplied straps to be MN style parachute material, you know, that kind of elastic, but not this one. It is woven in France on 19th century looms, blah, 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 and it does have very nice brushed titanium hardware also, but it doesn't have the give that you would expect from an MN strap. Plenty of Velcro though, plenty of length here. Both of those straps will comfortably go over a wetsuit at the weekend if you are doing some underwater navigation with a buddy. You'll also be able to get other single pass leather straps if you do want to dress this one up. Overhead legibility, absolutely outstanding. One of the best, if not the best watch I've ever reviewed for at a glance legibility. And outside natural light, there is enough anti-reflective undercoating on the sapphire crystal to keep things nicely legible even in the sun. And you can see once again just how sharp that case finish is. Beautifully finished piece of titanium, this one. On wrist, I think it looks okay on me. I'm not going to say, oh, if you've got a 6.5-inch wrist or downwards, don't bother. What I am going to say though is the bigger the better with this one, particularly because of the slightly longer lug to lug and the obligement to use that single pass style of strap. Pocket shot, that's pretty representative, I think. I think it looks good on me there. And I think this strap, this rubber strap, really does match nicely in terms of its tone, in terms of its colour with the dial and that bezel insert. So if I only complain about 3 things in my original Pelagos review, and all 3 of those things have either been rectified or sidestepped with this model, does that mean I've got nothing to complain about today? As if. I think there are 3 things you need to take into consideration if you are interested in one of these FXD Pelagos. Those being the lack of date, the fixed lugs seriously limiting your strap choices or necessitating the purchase of a whole new bunch of straps, and that countdown bezel. I don't think this one is as practical in everyday life, assuming your everyday life does not involve underwater navigation on a regular basis. I don't think it's as practical as a dive time bezel. If you're okay with those 3 though, I've still got some other issues. The first being the name, the Tudor Pelagos FXD, meaning fixed, an example of disembowelment. Now, I don't want to sound like my mum here bemoaning the desecration of the English language, but why did they have to bother with that? Why couldn't they have called it the fixed or the MN or something else? I just don't think it's befitting of a Tudor. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as my all-time favourite example of disembowelment, Fall Out Boy's 2007 classic, Thanks for the Memories, but I just don't think it's very Tudor. And then there's the 2 straps. The rubber one that I have mostly been wearing the watch on and mostly showing the watch on, I think tonally really suits the dial and hands. It all kind of matches nicely. The other one I think just looks really drab. It kind of brings the watch down rather than giving it a lift. It's not blue, it's not grey, it's not black. It's a kind of dirty blue, grey, black, and there's that ill-fitting stripe down the middle of it. I just don't think it goes nicely with the watch. And then there's the loom. What on earth am I going to complain about here? Look at that loom. X1 grade Super Luminova, I presume it's BGW9 though it isn't specified on their website. Looks absolutely sensational when you turn the lights out, incredibly bright. However, if I crank the speed right up, you can see it fades universally across the board as you would expect it to, apart from the minute hand. At the end of the 20 minutes, the minute hand is just about gone. This is only one example, but that's not fantastic. So then, is this the perfect Pelagos? Well, I guess that depends on you. If you're the type of person who wears your watches on NATO straps anyway, you're into this whole single pass look, this costs $1,000 less than the regular model for a bracelet that would have gone into your drawer or stayed in the box anyway, so I can definitely see the advantages of it. Plus it has a cleaner look and it is slimmer on wrist. Not for me though. There's too many compromises here with that bezel and with those fixed lugs. It's not quite where I want the Pelagos to go, but I think it is a real step in the right direction. It shows that Tudor can make a slimmer version of the Pelagos by dropping the water resistance. I've got no problem with that at all. And it shows they're prepared to delete at least one of the lines of text on the dial and the date. Personally, I cannot wait for them to release a black version of this on the bracelet, hopefully with a modified clasp, that is as slim and as clean looking as this one. That would be the perfect Pelagos. For me anyway. So there you have it, the perfect Pelagos. Well, perhaps for some, not quite for me yet anyway, but I think it does show that the perfect Pelagos is lurking somewhere in our futures. If you like this watch, and if you like this price point, why not check out my review of the Pelagos from last year, or I think its natural competitor, the Omega Seamaster. Thanks for watching, I'll see you